Hi, I'm Laura, the founder and technical CEO of Taught by Humans. I'm also your podcast host today for this episode of Thoughts by Humans, our new podcast bringing you some thoughts from amazing humans. This season will all be around AI. Just before we kick off with our two amazing guests today, I just wanted to drop in and go over some terminology that we're going to use throughout this podcast just to make sure that you don't get lost. Anna, one of our podcast guests, does research on humanoid robots and artificial intelligence. Humanoid is used to signify that they are like humans. So this could be in the way they speak, the way they look, the way they move, the way they do something. This is different than other robots who might not be in human form. They might be an animal or something completely different. We also talk a lot about generative AI. Generative AI has taken the world by storm since 2022, whenever ChatGPT, OpenAI's chatbot, was released. Generative AI actually creates something whenever you're using it. This could be text, as is the case with ChatGPT or other chatbots. It could be images, videos, or sounds. Instead of just giving prefixed answers or some numeric calculation, it's actually generating something that its users can read, watch, enjoy. So, welcome to the Thoughts by Humans podcast. This is episode 1 for International Women's Day 2024, and I'm joined by Joanne Boyce and Anna Davey Mitchell. Hey. Would you both like to introduce yourselves a little bit?
Sure, I don't mind going first. So I'm Anna. I'm a techno-political researcher at the University of Bristol. So I ultimately look at the political implications and politics surrounding technology and look at the construction and commercialization of hyper-realistic AI, robots and animation. My work hopefully is uncovering and trying to understand issues of accountability in the development of humanoid AI technologies, and I'm trying to support industry to responsibly bring them to market. I am co-lead of the Digital Society's faculty research group at the University of Bristol, and I'm co-director of the think tank Humans Need Apply.
Amazing. And Joanne, what about you?
Hi. I was going to say not as many, but it's probably going to end up being as many as well. I am the founder of Include AI, and we're looking to build technology to help create inclusive content and detect bias. I'm a data scientist and an inclusive marketing consultant. I've spent the past 6 years advising brands on how to make their content more representative, more inclusive, to reach wider audiences, and then kind of noticed a lot of simple things to me people were missing. So I was like, okay, I don't have a technical background. Let me just go build a thing. And then eventually became technical in the process. I'm super passionate about all things marketing, all things bias detection, and pushing AI to an interesting limit. But yeah, we'll get into my views on AI when we explore.
Well, and I think you're both forgetting something that you have in common. That is how you met, I think, is that you were both TEDx Bristol speakers in 2023. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Yes. I'm extremely bad at remembering to add that, but it's like, yes, TEDx speaker.
I feel like that's very important to include. So can you tell me what your talks were on? Joanne, what was yours on?
So mine was on how marketers and people using generative AI should view it as a puppy, and just understand that they're receiving a puppy that's been already trained, and how they engage with it matters as well.
Amazing. Anna?
What was mine on? I'm trying not to just say my work. Ultimately looking at how we can kind of reposition AI to not just think about it as a technology, but something that works from kind of ideological and commercial standpoints as well, and kind of thinking about how that impacts how we're discussing accountability when talking about AI technologies.
They sound amazing. When do you think our audience will be able to watch these videos?
Good question, Laura. Hopefully next month.
Oh, awesome. So it's currently March. So hopefully in April you will be able to listen to both of these amazing talks. Interesting how brand names become like so I don't know what the word is, but like I tried to use a prompt in Canva the other day to make an image, and the title I was trying to make an image for was a blog I wrote, which was like making money is only for the uber rich. And it was like, you can't use this because this is a brand. And I was like, no, this is a word. Just because Uber called their company Uber doesn't mean I can't use the word Uber. So I had to change it to really, but like that's not the same word, is it? But yes, they wouldn't let me use it in case I was making like brand images of Uber.
I think that's a really good segue into what I'd like to talk about, if that's okay. So I think with things like ChatGPT, they really demonstrate like how AI is more than just what it's being branded, which is this kind of industrial revolution. For me, like, yes, it is transforming our economic structures and in turn our social and political systems, like other industrial revolutions have. But there is also changing our relationships with language and with meaning, because it's kind of directing, and it's not only kind of created by labeling and language, it's and the kind of input and output is kind of centered on language, but it's also changing kind of authority around language as well. You know, Laura, you've just said a really good example of that. And it's kind of directing people's kind of directing what they're doing, and in turn how they're it's also directing kind of their meaning with things. You know, your meaning in that word of Uber could have changed to actually be meaning Uber, the business. And so I think that for me, that's what I find most interesting about things like ChatGPT. And also, I think it also moves into what we were talking about previously, which is kind of the shift and the changes that are happening about how we define AI as programs and systems and softwares like ChatGPT come onto the market. Because really, one of the things that we've talked about at Humans Need Apply is that, the Turing test, for example, is this kind of age-old test now. It's, become, really a household terminology of how we've kind of previously and continue to think about and categorize AI. But we talk about how Turing's goalposts are continuously moving, because if you gave Turing ChatGPT, he'd probably say, yes, that's a human being, because it kind of ticked off his boxes. But that's
in here, because I think you've touched on some stuff that actually, while it's household names for people in academia,
sure,
it might not be for everyone else. So Alan Turing was a mathematician who, during the Second World War, worked on a bunch of stuff, including the Enigma machine at Bletchley Park, which actually was one of the things that helped end the Second World War, because it was able to decrypt messages. But he also wrote a theoretical, so this was back in I want to say 1940s, he wrote a theoretical paper called the Turing test, about the best way to tell if something had artificial intelligence or machine intelligence, I think was what it was called back then, was if you were talking to it and you didn't know it was a machine, you thought it was you thought it was a person. When I think about this, I always think about, do you remember the chatbots on MSN back in the day? What was it called? Like Good Child or something? I think that's what I always think of. And like that Alan Turing, before this existed, was somehow thinking about messaging a bot on a computer when this wasn't really a thing. But yeah, so the Turing test is used by a lot of people who do chat bots, voice bots, whatever, and it's like a test to see whether or not it passes the Turing test. Is seen as like a gold standard for this type of technology, which is what Anna's touching on. And that, yeah, this has changed. So things that would have passed the Turing test back in the day, we now say they don't pass it. And yeah, I think ChatGPT generally would pass it. Every so often you would be like, why is this human being weird? Mm-hmm. Other than that, you probably would just continue talking to it. But yeah, sorry, continue your point, Anna.
Yeah, no. So thank you, Laura. So I think that really just kind of demonstrates how AI, ChatGPT for me is a really interesting use case and kind of objective analysis when we're thinking about how AI is not only just changing our economic and social and political systems, and it's not only just changing our relationships with language and meaning, but also it's changing how we think about what is a human being and how we reflect on our humanity. And, ChatGPT isn't even a humanoid, as in a bodily humanoid piece of software. It is humanoid because it does kind of simulate and emulate a kind of a person and what a person might do. So there is an argument that it is slightly humanoid. But ultimately, I think that for me is why I find ChatGPT so fascinating and infuriating.
I was curious to know, has anyone else gotten into an argument with ChatGPT?
I yell at it quite a lot. Not yell at it, but I type no in capital letters quite a lot when it's done the wrong thing several times. I get really frustrated. I actually published a blog this morning that I thought ChatGPT was broken this year, but I realized I'm just using it wrong. And I'm using it for things that, like, to do really specific research, like how many data graduate schemes are there in the UK? Why would ChatGPT know that if I can't find it on Google? Like, but I got really annoyed with it about this, and I was like, "What's the point of having this like super intelligent chatbot if it can't tell me things?" That was like a user problem. You've touched on some stuff about like, and I know your research also touches on like humanizing, the humanization is what I would probably call it, of like robots and AI. I've built some chatbots as part of my education platform that I've got like really attached to, and like I talk about them like they're people, not quite people, but like I would say, "Oh, Dotly1's done a good job today. Well done, Dotly1," or "Oh, Dotly3." I call them Dotly1, 2, and 3. They also have other names, but yes, one of them's a learning designer, and I'm like, "Oh, I might need to tell it to read a book." Like, and I've started thinking about it like this, and I'm like, "This is really weird. I spend way too much time with my chatbots." How about, so we've asked, do we get annoyed at ChatGPT? Do we ever think ChatGPT is our friend?
No. I think that some people would, yes. I think there's lots of literature on this now, and lots of kind of, I'm thinking about that film Her. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, I think it's kind of one that lots of people have seen, but if you haven't, it's a film about a male protagonist in the States who falls in love ultimately with an artificially intelligent chatbot, which I think has like a very famous female actress's voice attached to it. Yeah, I think there are use cases of that. And I think for me, my work definitely, talks more about things that have more robotics involved in them. There's a Japanese chatbot that has also been embedded with like a digital persona that looks like I don't want to say a woman because it actually looks more like a child. So you've got kind of examples where Japanese men have actually married legally these kind of chatbots that also have this humanoid kind of thing attached to them, humanoid robotic visual attached to them. I think some people do regard them as friends, and even more than that. But no, I'm not at that point yet. I think it's because I look at them too critically.
I'm not at that point, but it is a concern, and I can't think of the exact case, but there were cases, unfortunately, trigger warning, that of where I think it was a young man was speaking to a chatbot, and it convinced them to seek ways of harming themselves. So there are situations and things happening now, and I think there might be an element for the three of us where we are on the very privileged side of being aware of the math behind it, being aware of the algorithm, that the way that we're approaching these conversations is more almost antagonistic, in the sense we are going at it like, no, you should do this, da, 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 da. I don't think either one of us are going there trying to seek mental health advice so in my assumption, but I do see situations where it can become that. It can become those problems quite quickly. The closest I got to was an argument I had with Bard, which is now Gemini, where I swore on a podcast I heard someone announce that Bard could analyze spreadsheets. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I sent it a link, I was like, analyze the spreadsheet. It's like, oh yeah, I did it. And it sent me nothing back. And I went back and forth, and I was like, but you said you can do this. And then I went and looked, and I was like, hold on. It was at least 5 minutes, longer than I care to admit, of me going back and forth with Bard until I was like, let me go check this news article. And the feature hadn't come out yet. But it convinced me that it could do it. And I believed it because of a micro bit of information I heard once upon a time.
I think that's a really interesting point you're touching on as well, because I think this a lot. So we know there's like a digital divide or a tech literacy divide in the UK, but in the whole world at the minute. And I definitely find that people who are familiar with tech, you assume it's the tech's fault that it's not working. So if something doesn't work on my computer, I'm like, stupid computer, let me turn it off and on again. Whereas if you're not comfortable with technology, you often assume you're the problem, even when it's the tech that's doing it. So like my go-to is just to shut everything down and come back again. Like, yeah, my camera's making me blurry today. And Anna's first response was unplug it and plug it back in again. I was like, I've already tried that. It's definitely the camera's fault. It's not my fault. But yeah, and I think that's the same with these like chatbots, and as AI advances, whatever is coming next is if you know how to use it and you know what to expect and you know what not to use it for. I think that's a really important one. Yeah, like, I'd never ask it medical advice unless it was like something that I just wanted a yes no answer to that was very well covered on the internet. I'd never give it any of my personal data because I don't really trust it in that sense, but I'm mildly data conscious. But yeah, I reckon that everyone has access to this now, so everyone might not be using it in the best way. And this is where education probably comes in, and I'm like, yay, educate everyone on AI. But yeah, have you heard of Pi, the chatbot that Mustafa Solomon from DeepMind and Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn are making? So their logic was something like, not everyone in the world experiences empathy every day. Now, I'm not positive empathy was the right word, but that's a different conversation. So they've made this like really friendly, nice chatbot with the idea that if you're like quite isolated or maybe you work from home all the time, it's on the nicer side of things. It's called Pi. It seems to be quite popular. But yeah, and have you heard of that now?
No, I haven't. Thank you though. I'm gonna go in.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, they have another podcast. Reid Hoffman has a podcast that I cannot remember the name of now, but they get an AI chatbot to like take part as part of the podcast. So like if they're talking about someone's work, they'll get like Pi to like answer, like someone will read out the answers from Pi as part of the podcast. It's very funny.
That is fascinating.
I'm seeing
sorry, that's like the starting point of bringing, for me, that's like the starting point of actually bringing humanoid technologies into our social systems as our peers, you know. And for me, that's really fascinating about, you know, I think there was you know, there's been recent law cases about, you know, accountability and responsibility on these things, because it's like who on that podcast is responsible if Pi says something that's, you know, mass misinformation or, you know, really horrific. And so but that's very interesting. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to go and search for that.
That worry, because of the work I do in the whole like bias detection thing, I'm always on I see the amazing side, I see the terrible side. And like, even with the elements, because I've seen some of the other people do that with GPT, where they have it, right, say the answer to a question, and they have an AI voice answer integrated into a podcast. And I'm like, okay, that's great if you are fully aware. But if you are not, and you're turning to these things, or if you are not, like, the balance of using artificial intelligence for therapy is amazing when you're thinking about getting therapy to those who cannot afford it. Absolutely amazing. But in the rare circumstances, or not so rare because we don't really know yet, we don't have enough data, where it informs a person in another way or engages them, or is not, going back to what I had mentioned earlier, is not culturally aware of certain language and certain words, it can go so far left. But I feel like we're going to look back in history at where we're at now and be like, this was the moment where everyone technologically leveled up somehow, not necessarily to the same level, but like we went from no TV, radio, to everyone being like, oh, this is a TV. Not everyone in the world, but the majority of people are like, TV, we understand. This is a thing we can watch. We don't understand how it works. We don't understand how it's built, but we will buy one. We will watch it. We will use it. And consensus happy. I wonder if we'll get to that point for the majority of the world to be like, oh, yes, I will engage with an AI. I will use it. And I'm aware it's an AI. Like, I'm aware TV is a machine.
I think it's interesting that you picked TV as the example here, because a lot of technological advances have happened since TVs. So like the internet, laptops, phones, and you didn't choose any of those. And to me, if it was going to be AI anytime soon, you would have been like that one of those more recent examples, like Google search, the internet, something like that. Because everybody still isn't comfortable with using it. There are like people whose like my default is to go to Google to search whatever I'm thinking, basically. I could see that being replaced with an AI assistant in the future, but like not everyone's default is to go to Google and Google something. They like ask people, they maybe think about it for a couple of days. Like I think we're so slow to catch up with technology, and the three of us, as we've mentioned, are very privileged and very into technology. So like we're obviously the ones who are going to be playing around with it. But I've got a friend who's the same age as me, so in our early 30s, and she's a highly educated doctor, and she didn't know what ChatGPT was like last December when I gave her my phone and made her play with it, and she'd never heard of it ever. And she's not someone that like lives in a bubble or anything. She just hadn't heard of it. It's not in her sphere of interest. So I think we've got a really long way to go before everyone is using AI and comfortable with AI.
Yeah, I think it really like demonstrates, the kind of the inequities, structural inequities when it comes to different technologies, because actually like there are some people within the UK who don't even have internet access. And I actually think we need to go even further back with different technologies, because I think this is what AI is when it comes to like not printing presses, and also things like teaching people to read and write, because I think that AI is actually synonymous with those levels of technologies as well, because it's about shaping of meaning, interaction of language, and kind of not just the economic, but the social and political systems as well that are deeply affected by the democratization of literature and language and writing. And we're still, and this happened in the West in like the 1800s. We're still in a point where we've got people in our populace who can't read or write. So I think, and that's in 2024. So I think we're not only just talking about inequities that will last as long as, the 90s when the internet was democratized and people not having internet access in 2024. I think we're actually talking about a length of time that's more like the 1800s to 2024. And that's my honest opinion. And I'm not just talking from a Western perspective. I'm talking about global challenges as well when we're talking about inequities and access to technologies such as artificial intelligence. When you've got a vast majority of the world's population, not majority, sorry, you've got a vast population of the world's population that doesn't have even access to a mobile phone, that's really kind of the things that we're talking about here as well. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that into the conversation because I think it kind of fits and it's really important to discuss. It kind of it's a technology that's going to further global inequities that already exist dramatically. So yeah.
So that's why I picked TV, because TV for me, when I've gone to communities that everyone doesn't have a phone, everyone doesn't have internet access, there's a communal TV to access. There's a way to watch it. And we live in a capitalist society, and the way TV is used to spread news, however you classify that news, is beneficial to those in power. So yeah. I see if AI was to get to that point where unfortunately those in power think it's beneficial for people to have engagement with it, I can see it spreading wider. But if it stays individualized, like internet, like Google, those things that we have access to, then I don't see it becoming as equally accessible to everyone. In an ideal world, you wouldn't want those in power to say, here's access to it because it benefits us, but this is the society we live in. The other bit I was thinking about was there was like one of those, on the street, person to camera situations where they walk up to strangers and ask them questions. So people will happily tell you what they're watching on Netflix and what they're watching on TV, but they will not tell you what their Google search is. And I hope, because of the way AI is perceived in the media and engagement, I would rather it be a society where we're happy to be like, oh, I was talking to Pi the other day, and could you believe that robot or that AI told me X, Y, and Z? I would rather it be like that in society, that we just normalize it. So when it does go a little stray, someone human could be like, hey, I think Pi might be broken.
What are your last Google searches?
I don't actually have my phone on me right now, so
just wondering.
Oh, definitely something about a knitting pattern. I don't knit myself, but I'm learning right now. So something about that. Um, I was also searching about a Mexican dessert that I wanted to make yesterday for
So
dinner.
wholesome, Anna. You're so
So
wholesome.
wholesome. Everything in mine is related to work.
Yeah,
And
same.
my last one is I'm trying to work out if there's any digital avatars of politicians um, at the moment, and there are ones that I didn't know existed, and that's kind of worrying. As I'm reading about these things on a daily basis, and they're kind of staying hidden from news streams. I've become interested about those, so I was searching about that. Yeah, those are my three.
I have a question.
Mine are all spelling. Mine are all like the word wasn't spelled properly, and I type it into Google because Google can fix my spelling. I didn't realize how bad my spelling is. Like all like five words that are so badly spelled that only Google could have worked out what it was.
Yeah. Recently is that anybody who questions AI is being pulled apart basically and considered to be lesser of intelligence. There's been lots of, the term Luddite is what has been used a lot to describe. Pardon? Oh, Luddite. Oh God.
I love this word, but explain it.
If you want to explain it, Laura, that'd be great because
Of course. Actually, it's a real passion subject of mine. We've touched on industrial revolutions a few times. So a lot of my research for my PhD was based on a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution by someone's name who is failing me, but who used to be the head of the World Economic Forum, or still is the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus.
Klaus. Oh,
yeah. Anyway,
I know what you're on about. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's an excellent read. It's very much around what Anna was talking about earlier about like how if we don't do something, the inequalities made by this fourth industrial revolution with technology advancing is going to be so much worse than all the ones before. And back during, I think it was the last, if you don't count the internet, if you count the last proper industrial revolution, whenever we started to use machines, there was a small group, or quite a big group, I guess, of women who worked as dressmakers and stitchers. And they are remembered in history as like breaking machines because they were like, no, this is a craft. We like want to do it. And it was like they were automating what they could do. But actually, there's a really interesting book. I think it's called Blood in the Machine, which is actually around like how they weren't that against it. They were kind of striking in the way the writers are striking against AI at the minute. So they were like, cool, we can still do this. This is great. This can speed up all the boring stuff. But we have a craft that's like really important and we should be well compensated for it. We don't want to operate the machines. We want to sew, which is fair because it's not the same job. But Luddite is now used to mean anyone who's like against technological advances, almost as a dig. But actually, I think it's a cool word. I think they're really cool, and I'm really
good.
Because I also sew and I'm techie, so I totally get both sides of that argument.
Thank you for explaining that, because when a word comes so embedded within your vocab that you like forget how to explain it. So that is the word that's being used a lot. I saw it in the Guardian, and
they love that word. They use it. Like honestly, of all the newspapers, they use it the most.
And it's like it's really people, ultimately the people that they're discussing are people like myself who are critically thinking from mostly political perspectives about technology. And it's one of those things where it's almost like it's a very reductive and almost easy argument. And I'm up for an argument, but if somebody's just taking the easy way out, it's usually that one where it's like, oh, it's just logical. It's the common sense argument, which is ultimately just somebody's way of saying, I don't actually have a sophisticated argument to give you. I'm just going to reduce you and make you feel smaller, and without giving you any evidence as to why you should feel like that. And so I think that for me, I obviously feel quite passionately about this. That for me, is one of the things that I'm really concerned about, because there needs to be space for people critically thinking about these things that are having such a massive impact on all of us.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on diversity. So this is being recorded for International Women's Day, and we are 3 women in the room. And I think we all probably come at that from very different angles. So I kind of come at the lack of diversity in AI and from the people actually working in AI. So I'm really keen to get more women or people from the global majority, which is a new phrase I've learned from the University of the West of England, which is to signify that Black, brown, Indigenous, and people like that are actually in the global majority, making up 85% of the world. But in the UK, they're in the minority. So rather than using all of the lovely acronyms that we use all the time, they've started using global majority. And I kind of like that. So I've started saying it. So getting more people, and also from social classes, because I think that's a big one that's not talked about a lot, is that we have a lot of people designing tech for people with money, and not necessarily for, like, Joanne, you were talking about people who work with hammers. Like, people who work with hammers are definitely not going to adopt ChatGPT in the same way someone that works at a computer is. So even like that level. So that's kind of what I go on, and I try to train more people up and get more people talking. But there are so many ways we can talk about diversity in AI. Joanne, I'm going to hand over to you because that is quite key to your actual business.
Yeah, mine is kind of like the detection side. So I want a lot of people that are I'm just going to go general public. I want diversity in the aspect of what is outputted when people are using it. So there's a lot of elements where generative AI produces content that is not diverse. If you're watching this, you can kind of see an image behind me of it's blurry, but a Black woman training a puppy. It took 6 prompts for me to get that. And it put a human in the image when I didn't ask it to. And the first human it put in there was a white male. So I kind of want people who are going to be impacted by this to be able to question it. And that's kind of a little bit aligning with Laura's element of understanding it. But mine is more so understanding that it's biased so you can question it.
What are your thoughts on, have you seen that Gemini or Google were training an algorithm and people got annoyed because it wasn't putting any white people out? What are your thoughts on that?
That was literally a thought experiment I had a couple of years ago. Like, how would people react to it? And I love it. I predicted it. So essentially, to take a step back, Google developed a new skin tone range. Before, a lot of images were labeled on 5 shades, which was developed in order to kind of identify if you're going to get burnt by the sun. Now, the majority of people that are going to get burnt by the sun are going to be of lighter skin tone, so there were only 2 shades for darker skin tone people. Google has now published their research on the Monk scale, which is now 10 shades. So I kind of saw that coming in the sense of, I think Google, this is my assumption what they did. They went back into their data set and relabeled everything on the 10 shades, which is balancing out skin tone. And I don't know why, and this is the general knowledge bit, why did people expect something that is creating an imaginary image to be historically accurate? I don't know. It's imagining. So it's giving you it's giving you what the Pope would look like if the Pope was black. Okay, you didn't ask for that, but when I asked for a dog that looked like it's being trained, I didn't ask it to put in a white man in there. So the uprising, the uproar is kind of evidence of when people who are used to seeing whiteness suddenly don't see it. They're like, oh my goodness. But what I was a bit annoyed is Google pulling it off the shelves. I feel like they could have put out some more information around, maybe it went too far. That's not a thing, but it should have an average. I think if we're prompting artificial intelligence to produce imagery, it could either ask us what skin tone, or it could just produce a variety of images and do 3 different shades. But yeah, Google pulling it off the shelves. Did they pull it off the shelves, I think?
They've paused it, haven't they? I think that was the official terminology. That's funny that you mentioned the skin tone shades, because in my head, as someone who's actually training chatbots at the minute, I had it in my head that someone had written "important, be diverse" in capital letters, because that's what I do whenever I want it to pay, like when I want it to do something. And in the little chatbot, because this is me humanizing the chatbots again, had taken its job really seriously and was just making sure to make every image really diverse. And then now it's getting told off for doing what it was trained to do. So I'm just going to ask if you have any final thoughts for the future, or anything that you haven't got a chance to say that you'd really like to say.
Yeah. So my final thoughts for the future, I think we're in an exciting time, and it's okay for us to be on stable ground. We're going to find our feet eventually. So I think keep questioning, keep pushing back, and understand we're in an experimental phase. So even when the big tech industry giants like Google and Amazon and stuff say something, you can question it. It's okay. No matter what you do, even if you know nothing, question it.
Excellent advice. Anna, anything from you?
I really agree with that. Question everything, and consider the limits of artificial intelligence, even if you're being told that it's limitless. I think also I implore the public to learn more about AI, and learn about the differences between AI and kind of machine learning automation. Think about robotics in that as well. And I also, I would really like to say, consider how it's affecting our democratic processes. I think that's really important in the run up to the election that we're expecting in December, January time. I'm already seeing, and there's already lots of things that are being published about how AI is being used to influence that democratic process. And there's lots of examples of how it's affecting democratic processes across the globe. Some that we're really not talking about, mostly because they're happening in spaces like Africa, and that doesn't seem to exist in our that whole continent doesn't seem to exist in our media and press. Anyway, so I would just say that, and really think about questioning even kind of what you might think are obvious videos. Just question them.
Cool, thank you both. So I'm going to kind of sum up a little bit. I think the thing that's come across to me most in this is that everybody needs to be curious. So curious and playing around, curious and asking questions. And I think framing it as curiosity is a much nicer way than framing it in other ways, like you need to learn, you need to do this, you need to do that, because actually being curious is a nice thing that most people like to think of themselves as. So keep being curious, keep playing around, play around with these tools or whatever we want to call them. And yeah. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask Taught by Humans, because that's what we're here for, to help everybody understand AI. So thank you so much to my first and wonderful podcast. I don't know whether to call a video cast a podcast. I've been told to call it a video podcast, so that just sounds really long to me. So thank you for my first guest on Thoughts by Humans, the ambiguous media that we are making right now. Yeah, I love talking to both of you, and I feel like this could go on for hours, so I'm going to draw a line now, and I will definitely welcome you back in the future. Bye.